go. Hi, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee for January 28th, 2019. I'm Paul Krikorian, joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Kretz, Councilmember Blumenfield, and the newest member of the Budget and Finance Committee. I'd like to welcome aboard Councilmember Curran Price. Mr. Price, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
We have, I think, only one card for general public comment. Is that right? Yes, sir. Okay, so that's Mr. Previn? All right, so Mr. Previn, you want to come forward and go ahead and take your agenda item comments and general public comment, please?
Sure. Thank you, sir. It's Eric Previn from Studio City, CD2. And, you know, I was so delighted because I saw that you had a public meeting agenda in the committee meeting, which is just a moment of, I have to take actually 5 seconds and say thank you for agreeing to provide public meeting agendas in the public meeting. It shows a tremendous amount of good faith toward the idea that you want the public to participate, so thank you. You know, one of the issues that I think, you know, we agree on a lot of things, and then there are some things we don't agree on, is the refund program over in Claire Bartel's finance group. It's an interesting program. Today we have a drone outfit called, I think it's called DJI, getting $121,000 kickback. We got B. Riley and Company LLC getting 104 and Barrett Business, which is they help with employee deflavorization, $207,000 not kickback obviously, but refunded. So refunds are great, but here's the disagreement, and I think we've been over it a little bit. If all of those transactions were public, it would make total sense that, you know, I'm doing business in LA, but we also sell in Canada, so we shouldn't be taxed on the Canada. But the absence of transparency brings us into an area that upsets the public. So I bring it forward in the spirit of compromise. You got the escheating the monies when you're taking the money that people haven't been able to collect after being incarcerated. That you put on the agenda to show the number. But let's also show the numbers that we're actually involved in. And, sir, this is still on the items, right? I'm not in jeopardy of losing my general public comment yet? That wasn't lumped in. It was not lumped in. I have 1 minute for general.
I did notice, actually.
Yeah, this is just the
2+1
second part of the 2 minutes. Yeah. Thank you, sir, at the right time. So then there's the Freddie Torres legal battle. Obviously, this is awkward because I thought I read 300,000. This is an in-house guy, and we're settling out at that rate. So it worries me because I don't know what the confusion was. I know that we've got a lot of confusion. And I'm hoping that we can be just a teeny bit more, well, I don't know what to call it with those legal bills. You've got a big problem because you're keeping a lot on the inside. We should publish at the meetings the complaints for these cases because those are public documents. All right, in my final very, very chipper and upbeat wrap-up, I just would like to say, and thank Matt Hale and Blumenfield and certainly Koretz, we are really trying in Studio City, we have a neighborhood council, to vote in a way that will not be reminiscent of the horrible experience where we were dragged into the LA Times with all sorts of weird stuff because it's a broken system. So we collectively have fixed that system. We've called it the 10-5 board composition program. So you elect 10 people who are actually registered voters in Studio City and 5 who are other kinds of stakeholders from any kind. I mean, anybody fits, including guy on hat by freeway, if he, you know, wants to follow through, or she. So the only thing now left is for a pilot program to be granted, and we've asked Mayor Garcetti, who is, we hope that he'll join us because he oversees all the groups that are saying, you know, we have to do something in soon. So thank you, sir, with that.
Thank you, Mr. Previn.
Is much appreciated.
General public comment is closed. Are there any comments on any agenda items? No, sir. Okay. Comment on all agenda items is closed. Members, I'd like to propose for consent approval items. Well, I'll just read through with the recommendations. Item 6, to approve the CAO's recommendation. Item 7, to approve the motion. Item 8, to note and file. Item 9, to approve the Collections Board of Review recommendations. Item 10, to approve the Office of Finance's recommendation. Item 11, to note and file. Item 12, to approve. Item 13, to approve. Item 14, to approve. And item 15, to approve. Unless there are questions or concerns or objections.
You said 7 and starting with 7, basically?
6 through 15, yes.
I had one question on 6, but it's not, that's fine. That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Without objection, that will be the action of the committee as to those items. That brings us to our last open session item, which is item number 5. So I'd like to call that item and ask the Controller's Office to come on forward.
Item number 5 is a controller report relative to a proposed new electronic payment option for city vendors. The above matter was approved as amended by the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee on January 16, 2019.
Just give it a second, let them exit, which I'm sure they're all going to do expeditiously and quietly so we can continue with our meeting. All right, go right ahead.
Afternoon. The item before you, as stated, is the request from the Controller's Office for the administrative actions needed to get going on our new e-payables vendor payment mechanism. As part of the Controller's efforts to improve our relationship with the city's many vendors, we've been working to improve every aspect of the vendor process through improving our core systems and mostly trying to improve the speed and efficiency of our payment methods and mechanisms. At this point, what we have, while we have a number of electronic options, still more than 90% of our vendor payments are made via paper check, the old style payments. We're trying to change that for reasons that should be pretty obvious to many, or certainly anybody who's tried to do business with the city. So this new method is an electronic payment that is made via email. After the vendor has enrolled in the program, instead of getting checks, the vendor will get an email sent to them that says you have a payment from the city. They will click on the link in the email, and the money will be in their bank account. They don't have to call and find out when the payment was mailed. They don't have to wait for it. They don't have to have somebody in their accounting office open the envelope and stamp it and send it into the bank. The money's simply there. So that's the speed aspect, and it comes along with a lot of certainty as well, because it takes a lot of those timing delays out of the process. There is cost to this in just as dealing with any other credit card payment, and this is at its core, it's a credit card payment. There is a bank fee that goes along with it, but I think as we deal with many of our vendors, and certainly our vendors that process lots of transactions with the city, the speed and assurance of exactly when and how much is coming is worth that cost. Some of that cost then, again, similar to your own personal credit cards, some of that cost will come back to the city in terms that we've laid out in the report. We will get about a little bit more than 1% of the total transactions that we process through e-payables back to the city from the bank as a rebate. The program is completely optional for vendors. We're not pushing, we're not forcing anybody into the program. However, we will be doing a lot of outreach to give everybody the option of enrolling. We've started with GSD's procurement vendors, and after a few months of outreach with them, we've enrolled more than 100 of them, representing a pretty sizable chunk of our commodities vendors and our commodity spend. So it's a good start, but we have a long way to go in terms of enrollment. At this point, we just need the approval of the council to create a fiduciary fund to deal with the credit card payments, and then a fund to deal with the rebates. We're also requesting authority for one senior accountant to deal with reconciling all the bills that have gone out with the bank statements, and to troubleshoot, especially at the beginning of this program, as vendors may have questions, departments may have questions. So that's the request in front of you, and that's kind of a summary of the program. I'm here for questions.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions and I guess a comment. First of all, does it matter where the vendor banks? Do they have to be a U.S. Bank customer? Or
No.
Okay, so no matter the financial institution, that transfer takes place essentially immediately upon their opening of that email.
I can't say for sure that every single financial institution will work. Any financial institution that has a banking relationship with Visa will work.
And since it's voluntary in any event, if their banker didn't,
If for
allow
some
that, they
reason
could just choose not to.
that wouldn't work, the vendors could certainly simply opt out.
okay. The other question I have is, if I were to receive an email like that, I'd be surprised that it wasn't addressed, "Dear beloved one," or something, because that sounds like the classic phishing email.
It does.
You know, good news, a payment is available for you. All you have to do is click here. So how are we going to prevent either copycats of that? How are we going to let people know that this is a legit process?
The first outreach and the decision to this point, the decision to start with the general services commodities vendors was actually somewhat to that point. GSD has personal relationships between the city's buyers and the vendors. So prior to any outreach from the bank about the program, anything else, there was that personal contact with those vendors to say, hey, we're starting this thing. You're going to get a phone call and an email from the bank. It's legitimate. We are doing this. It's okay to talk to the bank. So that was kind of an establishment there. Then the communication between the vendor and the bank, again, initiated by the bank, but then returned and confirmed with the vendor to set everything up, will occur before anybody gets that email that says, congratulations, you're the lucky recipient of a payment from the City of Los Angeles. So they will have, each vendor will have registered a specific email address for where the payment emails will go, and then the person monitoring that should know exactly what that email is supposed to look like, what email address it's coming from. So that'll be very standardized and expected by the vendors that are receiving it. I will say that all plans laid out, I would still very much expect that as we start the program and as vendors start to get their first payment, we will probably get phone calls about that.
Yeah.
As vendors go, is this right? Is this, and that's fine. That's part of why we're asking for staffing to be able to deal with it.
And you'll get a lot of those emails routed to spam, and
Yeah.
there's going to be some growing pains.
Like anything else, there will definitely be growing pains. One of the other things that we like about this program is that between Visa and U.S. Bank, they actually carry most of they carry a pretty hefty kind of customer service, customer responsiveness load. So we'll take some of that. A lot of those questions about, exactly how to deal with their account, exactly how to deal with banking issues will be handled by U.S. Bank as well. So they take some of that load off of us.
Great. Well, I think it sounds like there's a lot of advantages to this. One of the complaints that we get more than any other from small businesses that try to do business with the city is the long delay in payment. I don't know if the back office part of, that is going to be speeded up at all by this, but at least this part of it will be a little bit more expedited, and that's a good thing. The one comment I would make before I turn it over to my colleagues is, I get that this will require some additional staffing on your part. I would not be supportive of holding the rebate funds received out of the general fund. That's a budgetary matter that we need to resolve on a budgetary basis. So,
Yeah, it is a budgetary.
okay. Mr. Blumenfield.
Okay, Is there a reason why we don't, and this is great, I'm excited that we're finally doing this. It's long overdue in many
Yes.
respects. So, but is there a reason why we can't go straight to a direct deposit system, that we have to do this?
We do have other payment methods that come with their own varying costs and efficiencies. We can and do make payments directly via wire. That's the fastest way of making payments. It's also the most expensive way of making payments. Generally, wires, at least in city practice, are for the very largest payments we make. If we're making 8-digit payments, 9-digit payments, usually those are wires. But that's a pretty expensive way of doing business. We also have ACH as payment option right now, so any vendor that wants to set that up can work with the Office of Finance to set that payment method up.
So they could set up a direct deposit through ACH.
They can set up ACH. That's currently existing. It's not widely used, and I can't really speak to why. I know the setup process for ACH is a little cumbersome. I don't know if that's an ACH problem or a City of Los Angeles problem, but I do know that it's not very widely used.
It would be a lot cheaper for us to do that.
It would be slightly cheaper for the vendors to set up ACH. I don't know the other pieces. We wouldn't get a rebate back, but
So how do we pay for this? Is it, I know we're getting a rebate back of between 1 and 1.8%. I mean, I think about like Venmo, where this is basically like a Venmo kind of thing, but that's a 3% hit. So are we paying 3% to them for the service? Is
No.
the vendor paying money for the service?
the vendor will pay through their card fees, through their bank fees. The city pays nothing for this.
So the 1% is all gravy, and from our perspective,
Yes.
it's the vendors themselves, to get this service, they're going to have to sacrifice presumably more than 1.8%. They're going to sacrifice. It's probably somewhere around the order of 2 to 3%.
It's between 2 and 3 usually. It depends on the bank.
So that's a disincentive for a lot of folks to get this direct payment.
It is. What we're seeing so far, I mentioned through the GSD enrollment and outreach, we're seeing between 25 and 30% of the vendors that have been contacted are coming back with a positive. So I would expect that was about where we expected to be on commodities. I think as we expand it into the service contracts, we'll see slightly lower numbers than that in terms of vendors that are interested in the program. I would expect between 20 and 25%. In the end, I'd like to be at 25% for this program because I think that's pretty achievable, and it seems to make sense for about that portion.
And one way to do that, we could give them part of the rebate back.
Good.
I mean, if we'd have to calculate how much we are saving, like how much are we saving when they do this? I mean, obviously we're getting the 1.8% or between 1 and 1.8%. That's cash money. That's easy to calculate. That's a number. But well, let me rephrase it. Are we saving any money by not having to process the paperwork ourselves and doing all of that? And if so, how do you calculate that?
Yes, we are saving some in terms of not printing checks and not paying postage on the outgoing. On a kind of individual transaction basis, that cost is pretty minimal. The whole check printing program is not tremendously expensive. So as we look across all of our payments, the transaction basis is pretty small. So I don't know how we would really.
There's not human costs and all that. I understand the stamps aren't very much and the paper's not that much, but don't we have to hire somebody who looks after all of that, and this would reduce the time that they have to do all that?
Yes, we have currently 2 to 3 people processing outgoing checks in Paymaster in the controller's office, and then we have a couple people dealing with all the checks that come back either get returned, returned in the mail, which we get a lot of due to address problems, or checks that go stale and somebody needs it reprinted. So across the whole kind of positions required by printing checks, I would say you're probably in the order of 5 people.
And the savings to those 5 people, does that not more than make up for the additional, because you're asking for a new position, but we're also saving on the other hand.
I think in the long run, if we're able to reduce our checks going out by a lot, by more than 20%, if we were able to, flip that and maybe reduce it by 80%, then I think we would probably be able to get away with, reducing staff on the check side. At this point, I don't think we're going to see enough reduction to actually see that corresponding reduction in people for processing. We're still going to be printing checks every day, 5 days a week. We're still going to have to staff the will call for people that want to pick up their checks. There's still going to be checks returned every day.
I mean, I guess it never works out perfectly, but in theory, if you have 5 people and you're reducing everything by 20%, then you've reduced 100% of one person.
You'd reduce about 1 FTE, yes.
Right,
So I don't think we could point to a
what you're asking
person.
for on the other end, which is 1 FTE. So
I think at some point it'll work out that way. I'd be very hesitant to kind of take that savings up front because I think it would cause problems on the back end.
I mean, maybe it's worth tracking.
Definitely.
I understand it does, especially at the beginning, you need someone, and it's going to take a lot longer, but the savings should trickle in, and hopefully more than that. And ideally, we'll keep track of that so that we can make this into a positive.
We can certainly keep
saving.
close track on that.
And then the other thing is, if we're kicking the money out faster, does that also cost us? I mean, it's a good thing for the vendors, and I want us to do it as fast as possible. The banks like it because they get the float, but we're now losing the float. Presumably, that money was in our account longer and collecting interest. Is that a cost as well to this program? And if so, have we quantified it?
The way kind of our accounting on our end will work is when the payment is made, since it's credit card payment, it's going to be, again, just to use the metaphor of your personal card. We're going to buy all these things, and the vendors will get paid. However, we don't pay at the time that payment is made. We'll pay the card. We'll pay U.S. Bank once a month for that card liability.
So maybe that's income. Then we're going to keep the float for a month.
We can. I think we could probably do some kind of data analysis once we're up and running to figure out where that balance is. I don't know how we would do that before, but it would be an interesting question to see whether the money's actually going out of the city's accounts sooner or later than under the e-payables model than with checks. I don't know the answer.
And I imagine it may not be insubstantial either. I mean, if you're talking about large amounts of money that are being floated,
It could. It'll also, one of the other things in our conversations with the Office of Finance that'll make their job a little bit easier, because we'll have a little bit more predictable outflow of actual cash, as we'll have one payment going out once a month instead of, say, 1,000 vendor payments or 100 vendor payments spread out through the month. This will be one payment once a month. We'll know about how much it's going to be in advance. So that'll be a little bit easier for finance.
I won't ask any more questions. Just a comment, though, I'd love to see, as we move forward, looking at options like sharing some of the percentage in order to induce a much greater number of folks, and financially how that plays, if that benefits us. Because if it does, we might be able to go from 20% to 80% much faster. And then
We'll keep
second
that in mind.
is how we can get more of the direct deposits, because that's better for everybody. Better for the vendors. We may not get the float, but we cut out the middleman getting the 3%.
Right. Our goal really, this is about the e-payables program specifically, but our goal is really not aimed at a specific payment method, but just away from paper checks. I don't care how we're paying people. I would just like to not be mailing them checks.
Thank you.
Mr. Price?
Thank you. Thanks for the report. This is an exciting development. You know, but not just large corporations, large businesses certainly want to benefit. We want to make sure that smaller businesses take advantage of this too, to the extent possible. You mentioned the plan to roll out this to services.
Yeah.
When's that next round, the next rollout round going to be? And more specifically, my question is, what are we going to be doing to educate, inform, encourage small, medium-sized vendors to take advantage of this program?
In terms of timeline, at this point, I think we anticipate that we'll start to make payments. I am admittedly assuming a council approval at some point soon, but I think we'll be starting to make payments to the commodities vendors in early March. That's as what will kind of pencil out. I think once we start making those payments, we'll immediately turn our attention to the services side. We will start with a mailer out from the controller's office to all of our services vendors, large and small, to let them know that this is a thing we're doing. And, you know, to the chair's earlier point, you're going to get contacted by the bank. I promise you it's legitimate. So we'll do that outreach. I don't know that we've really focused or thought of focusing that outreach on the smaller businesses, but we can certainly try and work on methods that'll be more focused on those small businesses that may not be quite as set up for this kind of transaction.
Well, you might partner, for example, with some of the ethnic chambers
That's a good idea.
to at least get the word out. Of course, they've got businesses of all sizes, but that might be a focus that you could have with some of the chambers, alerting them to what's coming up and coming down the pike. Now, you mentioned that you hope that ours would reach 20-25%. Is that consistent with other municipalities, or are we really setting the trend in this area as far as other cities go?
The short answer is yes. It's pretty consistent with the U.S. Bank's other customers for the program. Our commodities enrollments have actually been a little bit higher than our conservative estimates. So try not to be too hopeful, but the numbers have been slightly better than we were initially expecting.
Thank you.
Mr. Kretz?
Hey, we heard this in the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee. I think it's an idea with a lot of potential for increased efficiency, and so we support it in our committee and hope you will here too.
Well, and that would be my proposal with one amendment, which would be to strike recommendation number 4, which appropriates a certain amount of the funds received. Other than that, I would, if there's no objection, we can move forward with approving it as amended.
No objection.
No objection? All right, that will be the action of the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our open session items, so we'll proceed now into closed session. Does the City Attorney's Office have any? All right, we'll go back into open session. We are now in open session, and there is no other business before the committee, so we are adjourned.